Ray turned 62 in March, and by April, he had been told the same thing by 4 different people. His brother told him to wait. His neighbor told him to wait. A man on the internet with a whiteboard told him that claiming early was the single most expensive mistake a retiree can make. And his financial advisor, who is a decent person, told him that if he could hold out to 70, he would thank himself later. Ray sat at his kitchen table with a pen and a legal pad and did something none of them had done. He wrote down the year he would have to live to for the waiting to have been worth it. Then he wrote down the age his father died, and the age his older brother had his first heart attack. And he looked at those 3 numbers together for a long time. Nobody had ever framed it to him this way. Everyone had told him what the smart move was. Nobody had told him it was a bet. Here is what almost nobody says out loud about delaying Social Security. Waiting is not the safe option. Waiting is a bet. The Social Security Administration publishes the rules plainly, and they are not complicated. Claim before your full retirement age, and your monthly check is permanently reduced. Delay past it, and your monthly check grows, up to age 70, and then stops growing. So the arithmetic looks like a simple trade: a smaller check for more years, or a bigger check for fewer years. And somewhere out in the future, there is a crossover point, a birthday, at which the person who waited finally overtakes the person who claimed early and total money received. That crossover point is the entire argument for waiting. And here is the part that gets skipped. You have to be alive to reach it. You have to be alive, and you have to have not needed the money in the meantime, and you have to have not sold something at a bad price to get by while you waited. Delaying is not the conservative choice. It is a bet that you will live long enough, stay solvent enough, and stay patient enough to collect on it. For plenty of people, that is a good bet. I am not going to pretend otherwise, and later in this video, I am going to give you the 2 situations where waiting is clearly correct and claiming at 62 is clearly wrong. But for a large number of people, it is a bet they should not be making, and nobody tells them. So here is what this video is: 8 specific situations where claiming at 62 beats waiting. Not 8 arguments, 8 situations, described concretely enough that you can tell whether you are standing in one of them. Then 2 situations where waiting wins, stated just as plainly, because a video that only argues one side is not information, it is persuasion. At the end, you will not have a rule. You will have a way to tell which side of this you are actually on. Situation 1. Your honest read on your own health is not one you would bet money on. This is the first one because it sits underneath every other one, and because it is the one people find hardest to say out loud. The entire case for delaying rests on reaching the crossover, not approaching it, reaching it, and then living well past it, because the crossover is only the break-even. Everything after it is the actual reward. If the crossover sits somewhere in your late 70s or early 80s, then delaying only pays if you are still here in your mid-80s and beyond. That is not a morbid thought. It is the actual structure of the decision, and refusing to look at it does not make it go away. So the question is not, do I feel fine right now? Most people at 62 feel fine. The question is, what your family history says, what your own medical record says, and what your honest assessment is of the decade ahead, not the year. Ray's father died at 71. His older brother had a cardiac event at 64, and a second one at 68. Ray himself is in reasonable shape, but he has the same blood pressure numbers his brother had, and he knows it. For Ray, the bet on delaying is not a coin flip. It is a bet he is being encouraged to make by people who are, without meaning to, assuming a longer life than his own family history suggests. Now here is the part that surprises people. Nobody in Ray's circle was being careless. They were repeating advice that is genuinely correct on average. And that is exactly the problem. You do not retire on average. You retire once as one person with one health history. The averages in this decision are built from millions of people. Some of them live to 95, and some of them do not make 70. The average tells you what the population should do. It tells you nothing about which half you are in. And there is an asymmetry here that almost nobody mentions. If you claim at 62 and then live to 95, you will have received less total money than you could have. That is the cost of being wrong. If you delay to 70 and die at 68, you receive nothing at all from those years, and neither does anyone else. And the money you were waiting for simply never arrives. Both are losses. But one of them you get to live through and adjust around, and the other one ends the conversation. What to do this week? Write down 3 numbers on a piece of paper. The age your parents died or their current age. The age of your oldest sibling and their health. And your own honest answer to the question, what does the next 15 years probably look like for me, physically? Not what you hope, what you would actually predict if it were someone else's file. Most people have never written those 3 numbers next to each other. It takes 10 minutes, and it changes the shape of the decision. Situation 2. If you do not claim, the money has to come from your portfolio, and the market does not care about your timing. This is the one that gets missed most often, because people compare Social Security to nothing. They compare claiming at 62 against claiming at 70, as though the years in between were free. They are not free. You still have to eat. If you stop working at 62 and delay your benefit, you are funding those years from somewhere. And for most people, that somewhere is the retirement account, which means every month you wait, you are selling investments to cover living expenses. Now, put that in a bad year. The years right around when you stop working are the most dangerous years in a portfolio's entire life. It has a name, sequence of returns risk, and the mechanism is simple. If the market falls 30% while you are withdrawing, you are selling more shares to raise the same amount of money, and those shares are permanently gone. They are not there to recover when the market comes back. A portfolio that takes a bad decade at the start of retirement and a portfolio that takes the same bad decade at the end are not the same portfolio. They can end up hundreds of thousands of dollars apart with identical average returns. So here is what claiming at 62 actually does in this scenario. It puts a stream of guaranteed monthly income underneath your spending, which means the portfolio does not have to be sold into a falling market. Every dollar the check covers is a dollar of investments that stays invested. Call her Denise. Denise stopped working at 62, and on good advice, delayed her benefit. For the first 3 years, the market was kind, and nobody noticed the risk. In the 4th year, it was not kind, and she had to keep withdrawing anyway, because rent does not pause for a correction. By the time her larger check finally arrived, the portfolio it was supposed to complement had been meaningfully reduced by the years of waiting. The bigger benefit was real. So was the smaller account underneath it. The version of Denise who claimed at 62 would have had a smaller monthly check and a larger portfolio behind it. Which of those two is better depends entirely on what the market did in the gap. And you do not know that in advance. That is the whole point. Notice the pattern. Delaying converts a market risk you can see into a longevity risk you cannot. People treat that as an upgrade. It is a trade, and whether it is a good one depends on things nobody can forecast. What to do this week? Work out roughly what you would need to withdraw each year between 62 and your full retirement age if you claimed nothing. Then look at that number as a percentage of your portfolio. If it is uncomfortably high, the gap years are not a neutral waiting room. They are the most expensive part of the plan. Situation 3. You are the lower earner in a couple. This one is genuinely underused, and it is the closest thing to a free lunch in the whole decision. Here is the structure. In a married couple, Social Security is not one decision, it is 2, and they do not have to match. You can claim one benefit early and delay the other. Most couples never consider this because they think of the choice as a single household switch that goes on or off. Now think about what each benefit is actually doing. The higher earner's benefit is the one that matters most in the long run, for a reason that has nothing to do with either person's retirement and everything to do with survivorship. When one spouse dies, the household does not keep both checks. It keeps the larger one. So the higher earner's benefit is not just their income, it is the floor under whichever of the two lives longer. Delaying that one has a double effect. It grows during the delay, and it grows the survivor's income potentially for decades. The lower earner's benefit does not carry that weight. It is smaller, and in most cases it disappears when the first spouse dies, which means the two benefits should not be treated the same way. And for a lot of couples, the answer that falls out of this is the lower earner claims early, the higher earner waits. The lower earner's check starts covering household expenses at 62. That income means the portfolio is not being drained during the gap years, which is situation 2, solved. And meanwhile, the higher earner's benefit keeps growing, protecting the survivor. Call them Hector and Lorna. Hector earned significantly more across his career. Lorna worked for years with gaps for family. Under the single switch thinking, they were choosing between both claim at 62 and both wait, and both options had an obvious flaw. Splitting it removed the flaw. Lorna's benefit came in early and carried the household. Hector's kept growing and will be the floor for whichever of them is alone at the end. Neither of them had heard this framed as an option. Their advisor had, and it had simply not come up, because the conversation had been about when should we claim, rather than when should each of us claim. What to do this week? If you are part of a couple, find out which of you has the larger benefit at full retirement age, not who earned more last year, whose record produces the larger benefit. It is on your Social Security statement, and half the couples I have described this to have guessed wrong about which one of them it is. Situation 4. The money is worth more to you at 65 than it will be at 85. Not worth more in dollars. Worth more in what it can actually buy you. There is a shape to retirement spending that people who study it keep finding, and it is not flat. Spending tends to be highest in the early years, when people are healthy enough to travel, to visit family, to do the things the whole thing was for. It tends to drift down through the middle years as the pace slows. It can rise again at the very end, but that late rise is mostly medical, and it is not the kind of spending anyone looks forward to. So the years from 62 to roughly 75 are, for most people, the years the money is actually for. Delaying to 70 takes income out of exactly that window in exchange for a larger check in the window, where you are least likely to spend it on anything you would call living. Now, that trade can absolutely be worth it. A bigger guaranteed income at 85 is real insurance against real risks, and I am not dismissing it. But it should be a conscious trade, and it almost never is. People delay because delaying is framed as the responsible thing, without anyone asking them what they were planning to do between 62 and 70, and whether the money would have mattered then. Call him Sal. Sal delayed, correctly by the arithmetic, and turned 70 with a substantially larger check. He also spent his 60s not taking the 2 trips he had talked about for a decade, because the cash flow was tight during the wait. He is not poor now. He is comfortable. He also has knees that no longer agree to walk around foreign cities. He would still tell you he made the right financial decision. He is less sure he made the right decision. What to do this week? Write down 2 or 3 things you actually want to do in the next 8 years that cost money. Then ask whether delaying your benefit makes those more likely or less likely. If the honest answer is less likely, that is a real cost, and it belongs in the calculation alongside the crossover age. Quick, honest note before the second half. I am not a financial advisor, and I have no credentials in this. Everything here comes from the rules the Social Security Administration publishes openly, and from my own reading, and every single case in this video, is an illustration, not a projection for anybody real. Social Security interacts with taxes, with Medicare, with spousal and survivor rules, and with your specific earnings record in ways that genuinely require someone to look at your actual numbers. Please talk to someone qualified before you file. This decision is permanent in ways most financial decisions are not. Now, Situation 5, which is the one that catches high earners. Situation 5. You already have guaranteed income for life from somewhere else. This one flips the logic of the whole decision, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Ask what delaying Social Security actually buys you. It buys a larger stream of income that is guaranteed for as long as you live and adjusts with inflation. In insurance terms, it is protection against the risk of living a very long time and running out of money. That protection is genuinely valuable. But like all insurance, its value depends entirely on how exposed you are without it. If your entire retirement income is Social Security plus a portfolio that could be depleted, then longevity is a live risk and the insurance is worth paying for. Delaying makes sense, and it makes a lot of sense. But if you already have a pension that pays for life, or an annuity, or rental income that is not going anywhere, or a spouse with a large benefit of their own, then the floor under your old age already exists, and you are buying a second layer of protection against a risk that is already largely covered. Call her Marguerite. Marguerite has a public sector pension that pays for life and adjusts. Her Social Security is a supplement, not a foundation. She was advised to delay to 70, and the advice was given sincerely, and it was calibrated for someone whose situation was nothing like hers. For Marguerite, delaying meant paying a real price, 8 years of foregone income, for insurance against an outcome her pension had already handled. She claimed at 62, invested a portion of it, spent the rest, and her retirement is not less secure for it. It is differently shaped. Here is the general form of this. The value of delaying is inversely proportional to how much guaranteed income you already have. The more floor you have, the less another layer of floor is worth. And the standard advice does not adjust for this, because the standard advice is written for the person with no pension at all. There is a second version of this that catches people with large portfolios. If your investments are big enough that running out is genuinely improbable, the longevity insurance is again worth less to you. Not worthless, but less. The person with $400,000 and the person with $4 million are given the same advice about delaying, and it cannot possibly be equally right for both. What to do this week? List every source of income you will have at 80 that is guaranteed for life and does not depend on the market. Pension, annuity, spousal benefit, rental income you would not sell. If that list already covers your essential spending, the case for delaying is much weaker than the standard version assumes. Situation 6. Delaying can stack your income into the exact year everything else arrives. This is the one almost nobody models, and it is pure arithmetic. Here is the sequence. You delay Social Security to 70 to get the larger check. Then, at 73, required minimum distributions begin on your pre-tax retirement accounts. That age is set in the rules, it is not optional, and the amount is not your choice either. So from 73 onward, you have your maximum Social Security benefit and your mandatory withdrawals arriving in the same tax year every year for the rest of your life. 2 large income streams stacked permanently. Now compare that with the version where you claimed at 62. Your Social Security is smaller, and critically, the years between 62 and 73 were lower income years, which is exactly when moving money out of pre-tax accounts is cheapest, whether by spending it or by converting it, or simply by drawing it down before the mandatory withdrawals start. The delayed version does the opposite. It keeps taxable income low in the years when low income is useful, and then produces a spike in the years when you have no control left. Social Security also has its own quirk here. How much of your benefit is subject to tax depends on your other income. So the larger your other income, the more of your benefit becomes taxable, which means the two streams do not just add, they interact. I am deliberately not putting numbers on this, because the thresholds and brackets are specific and they change, and getting them slightly wrong in a video is worse than not stating them. But the shape is stable, and it is the shape that matters. Delaying moves income from your cheapest tax years into your most expensive ones. Call him Otis. Otis did everything the sensible way. He delayed to 70. At 73, the required withdrawals started on an account that had been growing untouched for 11 years, because he had been living on other money while he waited. His income in his 70s is higher than his income was while he was working. He is not complaining. He is also paying tax at a rate he never modeled, on money he cannot choose not to take. The version of Otis who claimed at 62 and drew down the pre-tax account through his 60s would have arrived at 73 with a smaller mandatory withdrawal on a smaller balance and a smaller benefit stacked on top of it. Less income and considerably less friction. What to do this week? Take your current pre-tax balance, project it forward to 73 at a modest growth rate, and look at what the required withdrawal on that number would be. Then imagine your full Social Security benefit landing on top of it in the same year. Most people have never seen those two numbers in the same sentence. Situation 7. Claiming at 62 buys you the option to stop working now instead of at 67. This one is not about maximizing total dollars. It is about what the dollars are for, and it is the situation people are most embarrassed to admit they are in. There is a version of the delay strategy that quietly assumes you keep working. If you are healthy, employed, and content in the job, delaying costs you very little. Your salary covers the gap years, and the benefit grows in the background. That is the version the advice was written for. And for that person, it is close to a free upgrade. But a lot of people at 62 are not that person. A lot of people at 62 are tired in a way that does not resolve with a vacation. They are in a job that has changed underneath them, or a body that no longer does the work without complaint, or a company that has made it quietly clear that the next reorganization has their name in it. For that person, delay to 70 is not a financial strategy. It is 5 more years of a job they wanted to leave. Claiming at 62 converts a smaller check into an immediate option, the option to stop. And options have value even when the arithmetic on the underline is not the best available. Call her Bev. Bev could have made it to 67. Financially, on paper, waiting was better. What waiting also was, in her case, was 5 more years of a commute she had come to dread and a manager half her age who scheduled meetings at 7 in the morning. She claimed at 62, took a smaller benefit, and left. Her total lifetime income will be lower than the optimized version. Her total lifetime is the same length either way, and she got 5 years of it back. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is the argument most easily used to justify a decision someone has already made emotionally. The honest version is not claim early because work is hard. The honest version is, the value of stopping is real and belongs in the calculation, at a number you choose deliberately, rather than pretending it is 0. Most people either ignore it completely or let it silently decide everything. Both of those are worse than naming it. And there is a practical wrinkle worth knowing. If you claim before full retirement age and keep working, the Social Security Administration applies an earnings test that can temporarily reduce your benefit. It is not lost permanently. It is recalculated later. But it does mean that claiming early while still working full-time is usually the worst of both worlds. That is a real reason to wait, and we will come back to it in the counter cases. What to do this week? Put an honest number on what 1 more year of working is worth to you, positive or negative. Not what it pays, what it costs. If you cannot bring yourself to write a number down, that itself is information. Situation 8. The crossover age is not a prediction. It is the price of the bet. This is the last one because it reframes all the others, and because the crossover age is the number people cling to hardest. Someone will tell you that if you live past a certain age, waiting wins. They will say it as though they have told you what to do. They have not. They have told you the terms of a wager. Here is what the crossover actually is. It is the age at which the total money received by the person who waited catches up with the total money received by the person who claimed early. Before that age, claiming early is ahead. After it, waiting is ahead. That is all it is. It is not a forecast. It contains no information whatsoever about how long you will live. And there are two things it quietly leaves out. The first is that the early claimer had the money earlier, which means it could have been invested or used to avoid selling something at a bad price, or used to avoid taking on debt. $1 at 63 and $1 at 71 are not the same dollar, and the simple crossover calculation treats them as though they are. The second is that the crossover assumes you make it there in a straight line, with nothing going wrong in between. No bad market in the gap years, no health event that changes your spending, no family situation that needs cash. Once you add those in, the crossover moves later, sometimes much later than the version quoted at you. So when someone tells you the break-even age, the right response is not, "Should I wait?" The right response is, "How confident am I, honestly, that I will be here well past that, and that nothing in between will force my hand?" If the answer is very confident, waiting is a good bet, and you should probably take it. That is a real answer, and plenty of people can give it truthfully. If the answer is anything less than that, you are being encouraged to make a wager that the person encouraging you will not have to live with. What to do this week? Find out your own crossover age. The Social Security Administration's own tools will give you the benefit figures at different claiming ages, and the arithmetic from there is 1 subtraction and 1 division. Then say out loud how likely you think it is that you are here and, 10 years past it. Now, the other side, and I mean this seriously, these two are not a formality. Counter case 1. You are still working full-time, and you have not reached full retirement age. This is the clearest one. If you claim before your full retirement age and continue to earn above the limit the Social Security Administration publishes, the earnings test reduces your benefit for those years. You get it back later through a recalculation, but in the meantime, you have permanently reduced your monthly check for the rest of your life, in exchange for money that was partly withheld anyway. Claiming at 62 while working full-time is, for most people, simply the worst available option. If you are still working and you intend to keep working, wait. At minimum, wait until you stop. Counter case 2. You are the higher earner and your spouse will likely outlive you. We covered the mechanism in situation 3, but here it cuts the other way. When one spouse dies, the household keeps the larger benefit, not both. If you are the higher earner, your benefit is not only your income, it is the income of whoever is left. If your spouse is younger, or healthier, or both, then delaying your benefit is not really a bet on your own longevity at all. It is a purchase of income for someone who will very likely be here to collect it, for a long time, alone. That changes the arithmetic completely, and it is the single strongest argument for delaying that exists. If you are the higher earner in a couple with a good chance of a long survivorship, the case for waiting is strong, and most of the 8 situations above do not override it. Notice that both counter cases have the same structure. They are situations where the bet is no longer really about your own lifespan, either because the money is being withheld anyway, or because someone else is going to be collecting it. That is the actual test underneath all of this. Delaying is a bet on longevity. So the only question that matters is whose longevity and how good is the bet. So put the 8 together and notice what they have in common. Health you would not bet on. A portfolio that would have to be sold in the gap, being the lower earner in a couple. Years when the money still buys something. Guaranteed income you already have. A tax collision waiting at 73. The option to stop working now. And a crossover age that is a wager, not a forecast. Not one of them says claiming early is better. Every one of them says the same narrower thing. The standard advice is calibrated for a person, and you should find out whether that person is you. The default is not wrong. It is just a default, and defaults are built for the middle of a distribution that you personally do not live in. Ray never showed anyone the legal pad. He filed at 62. Not because a video told him to, and not because he had run better arithmetic than his advisor. The advisor's arithmetic was fine. He filed because when he put the crossover age next to his father's age and his brother's cardiogram, he could see clearly that he was being asked to bet on an outcome his own family had not delivered. He might be wrong. He might live to 94 and spend 3 decades receiving less than he could have, and he knows it. But it will be his bet, made with his own numbers, instead of a default he accepted, because 4 people told him it was the responsible thing. That is the whole point of this video. Not to change your answer. To make sure the answer is yours. Tell me in the comments, which of the 8, or which of the 2, describes you. I read every single one.